So the clinical definition of depression is a mood disorder characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and loss of interest or pleasure in activities. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, at least 17.3 million people have suffered from a depressive episode in 2019. We're in 2024 now, so that number must be up. And if we go back to the definition of depression, there's key words in there: sadness, hopelessness, despair. And I think Brene Brown with Atlas of the Heart does an amazing job being able to give us some emotional intelligence and putting real definitions into what these words mean. What does hopelessness mean? What does despair mean? What does true sadness, persistent sadness? So on page 101, she talks about hopeless and despair. Everything about these words is hard. First, they are both emotions and experiences that can lead to feelings of desperation and can pose serious threats to our well-being. Second, it is really difficult to separate these two constructs and talk about them as different experiences. Yet they are. In the despair research, the word hopeless is often used synonymously with despair. But in the research of hopelessness, we see very few mentions of concept of despair. So let's break it down. While hope is not an emotion, hopelessness and despair are emotions. So that's a very distinctive difference right there. Hope is not an emotion, but hopelessness and despair are. So that's going to be a feeling. Hopelessness arises out of a combination of negative life events and negative thought patterns, particularly self-blame and perceived inability to change our circumstances. When I read that part of perceived inability to change our circumstances really hit me. I just was watching Alex Hormozi. If you haven't been watching him, he is this multi-millionaire on a rant to help other people become millionaires. He's an amazing entrepreneur and his content on YouTube is top tier. But he was talking about depression and anxiety. And one of the definitions that he used for depression was, depression is the lack of options leading to hopelessness. So how do we fix or change that hopelessness? It's lack of options. How do we give ourselves options? Through knowledge. We have to go back and see what don't we know and what can we change. He thinks very analytically, and I love that because it really gives a clear visual of like, hey, this is depression. Depression is the inability of having options. How can you give yourself more options in life? Just like with anything, whether it's your job, how can you give yourself more job opportunities, having more abilities, having more skills? So I think a lot of these things can be applied to emotions as well. In the book, Brene Brown goes on to say, hopelessness can apply to a specific situation, such as feeling hopeless about finishing school or feeling hopeless about our financial future, or to life more generally. So again, going back to that definition, to life more generally, it could be negative life events that just continue and continue and continue to happen. Like you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. She also says despair is a sense of hopelessness about a person's entire life and future. When extreme hopelessness seeps into all corners of our lives and combined with extreme sadness, that's what we call despair. And this is like an extreme episode of depression where you can literally not see any good thing in your life. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything and anything that can go wrong is going wrong. And you're feeling hopeless and you're feeling despair. And I think when we put these practical definitions on, it really helps us because now when I feel depressed or despair, it just means that I'm lacking options. It means that it doesn't matter. I'm feeling like it doesn't matter what I do tomorrow because there's no way out. So how do we get more options? We learn more. We find things that we don't know yet. Because to be honest, even in the darkest times that I felt like, oh my gosh, my life is going to shit. I got married at 19. I'm getting a divorce. I saved myself to marriage. I was in this really high demanding religion and I was just fucking lost. And again, I was 23 when I decided to separate, 24. And I felt like my life was falling apart. I felt like I had nothing. I felt like there's no hope for me. And again, that's me at 24. I'm 28 now and I'm glad that there was hope, that there was light at the end of the tunnel, but I really had to get myself options. And I realized I didn't have any options because I was dependent on my husband to pay the big bills. So I couldn't even financially support myself. You know, that can literally put you in a depressive episode when you don't have anywhere out. I literally could not financially support myself. So how did I get out of that? I got another job. I learned new skills. I elevated. I spend less, because that was the big thing for me, was finances. So again, when we're feeling depressed, I think knowledge and getting more options is truly something that can help us. And one of the quotes that she talked here on her book, it just made me think of like being able to see your life not only in what's happening now, but being able to see it broader and in a way that it's like, wow, like some of these things are not gonna really matter to 5-10 years from now. When I'm really scared, worried, overwhelmed, stressed about what's happening, and trying to find perspective, I ask myself, will this issue be a big deal in 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months, 5 years? So when we are in that despair of like, oh my gosh, nothing's going right, I'm gonna be poor forever. We really have to think ourselves, is it forever? I think a lot of the times we are the problem, but at the same time, we are also the solution. You know, I think sometimes our brain, our minds can play games on us and create these stories. Brene Brown loves to say that, like, what is the story that we are creating? Our mind is really powerful, and it can create a narrative that there is no hope. Or it can create a narrative that there's always tomorrow. So that's why I'm so big on here on GS for Growth about mental health and self-awareness and self-love and advocating for yourself and really setting your boundaries. I'm getting chills. And knowing who you are. Because this is the armor, this is the shield that's going to protect you from depression, that's going to protect you from anxiety, that's going to protect you from loneliness. If you are okay with being with yourself, by yourself, and for yourself, you will be fine. If you guys are enjoying this kind of content, make sure you watch the full video right over here. Thank you so much. I love you guys, and I'll catch you guys here. Ciao.